Hello and welcome to an new video, and today we are going to be asking ourselves, what is Kris? Because frankly, it's a little more complicated than we first imagined. Now when it comes to Kris and Deltarune, we could have two separate instances of how it could play out. Either we are in control of Kris and Kris is the first person who was ever in Kris's body, or we are playing as Kris and a second being is currently taking control over Kris's body. We know it's either one of those two because we and another being seem to have control over the same body. More specifically, we seem to have control over the soul itself. Now, this is a different universe, however, in Undertale, the soul is described as the very culmination of your being. So perhaps we are actually Kris, and the being that is currently taking control of Kris only needs the body and not the soul. Because it is not, in fact, the being of Kris, it is instead something else. We know that we are in control of the soul separately, by the way, through the chapter 1 ending, because we can actually move the soul in this cage. We also know that someone else was in charge of the soul before we arrived. We know that because of the bird cage. At the start of chapter 1, we already see that the bird cage has sustained significant damage. That is because of the soul being thrown into it. So even before we arrived, someone was in control of the soul. Something different from whatever is ripping it out. Now, how can we establish which of these two things is true? Well, we would have to take a look at every single instance that we are not the one making the choice, and instead it is the second entity. When it comes to chapter 1 and 2, we know a lot of things that the second being inside of Kris has done. The major things are: plugged in the TV, ate a pie, and made a chapter 3 dark fountain. And of course all of the planning that comes with the chapter 3 dark fountain. But those are only the start and end of chapter things that they have done. Because in the middle of the chapter is actually where the scenes play that makes me believe one of those theories over the other. These two instances being Spamton and Noelle. Or to be more specific, the dialogue that plays after the Spamton fight is done, and the Snowgrave Noelle date between Noelle and Susie, not between Kris and Susie. Yeah. So let's go through those scenes one by one. In the Spamton scene, the second entity actively wriggles control away from our player. They will still do what the player tells them to do, but they will add something on top of it, because whatever that second entity is has their own opinion on the matter. Realce asks if Kris is fine. We can answer yes or no, but in actuality, whoever is that second entity is not fine. If we answer no, the entity just starts screaming, and if we answer yes, they are still not fine. Of course, there's a lot of parallels to be drawn between Spamton and this potential Kris. If we are the one in control and Kris is the one that's supposed to be in control and we're just taking over the body, we can be interpreted as the strings that kept Spamton away. And after Spamton's defeat, no matter if we spare him and free him of those strings or, beat him down, he will always end up dead. So to the Kris that would be here, this is a very foreboding message. If they are currently acting as the puppet on a string, what if those puppet strings were to be removed? Would they end up exactly like Spamton? If yes, that would be very bad. Now, for the context of this scene, Noelle, throughout the entirety of this run, was basically forced to murder. We, no matter who we are, forced Noelle to commit murder after murder after murder just to become, quote-unquote, stronger. This also includes her classmate, Berdly. So basically, what we did this entire run is torture the ever-loving shit out of this person. Now, this person right here is childhood friends with Kris. Now, this Kris could either be Kris, the person that is trying to actively make a dark fountain in chapter 3, or me, right now, playing the goddamn video game. But what the second entity does here is very interesting. In a non-Snowgrave playthrough of this very scene, Realce initiates dialogue with Kris and transitions us, the player, to this location. In Snowgrave, Realce chooses to do the exact same thing. However, we are stopped. Now, it's rather obvious that Realce is completely weirded out by us not being gone, so that must mean Realce has a little bit of meta knowledge. Realce is aware of us, and in this scene is trying his damnedest to get rid of us. Additionally, that means Realce was lying in the Spamton scene with Kris is saying they don't want to worry about us because Realce is very aware that Kris is not the one saying it. They were lying to Susie. No matter what the player does, Realce wants them out of this scene and have a talk with whomever is the other person in control. Now, this alone would already have me believe that it's probably more this theory, where Realce is trying to talk to Kris. However, due to them not being able to talk alone in that scene because of Snowgrave, the only other possible explanation for why we were blocked to do it is because the second entity did it, and the second entity could only have been Kris because only Kris would care about us being with Noelle. Because literally no one else knows about us doing this. So the second entity is the one that doesn't let us be here. So it must be someone with meta knowledge with the power to keep us in place. And the only person that was in this scene that fits is Kris. Or more importantly, Kris trying to protect their dear friend. So ultimately, me, and I'm pretty sure literally everyone else believes in this theory. Except the people who don't believe in any of these theories, because some people believe that we are not in control at all, and we are instead controlling a character who is in control. So that it's not that matter. Basically, they want the story to not be the story. Lamau. But clearly it is us in control, and we took this control from someone else because of the birdcage. And this is besides the point, but I would just like to mention it. If there's indeed only one knight, and that knight is Kris, and the reason the Chapter 2 Dark Fountain was rushed in the first place is that Kris can't do it really good when they don't have a soul in them, means that whoever was in charge of the soul in before us is in fact a knight. Which would again mean that the one night theory doesn't work. In no way, shape, or form is it one night. It's at least two. Every time. Fuck you. Cue the clown! You know, sometimes I look at myself and think I'm a sex icon, and then I remember I'm a virgin.